The new sensationalistic statement of the day is white people don't exist. This is a deliberate misuse of a deceiving declaration, completely unfit to address a very complex discourse stemming into biology, genetics, politics, culture, and language. I'll do my best to address it professionally. Hello noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and on this channel, in the midst of all of these lies and psychological manipulation, is a place where reason, logic and fairness still hold value in order to give you a non-political, sensible take on this matter. But I would like to begin by reading an article which I believe to be at the basis of this announcement. This one here. White people don't exist, says author Walter Mosley. Walter Mosley, American crime fiction novelist. Yes, this does sound like the sort of fiction a novelist would write about. Befitting, says racism will end when we realize white people don't exist. Well, I'll respond to this second statement at the end of this video, but let's begin by saying how he justifies this allegation that we apparently need to realize, aka white people don't exist. In my experience, there are usually three different founding premises that are used to try and support this proclamation: the linguistic basis, the cultural basis, the political social construct basis. Today I'll dismantle the first two, and then I'll address the third one, which does require a bit more of a nuanced take, if you will. I am curious to see which one he decided to go for, so let's keep reading. Mosley also invoked a things that make you go moment. Doesn't make me go makes me go facepalm. He challenged our collective societal construction of race, specifically our acceptance and use of white to identify a culturally diverse group of people. Okay, so it's the cultural one. Piece of cake to debunk. You'll see. I've been giving this talk a lot lately that the big issue about race in America is that there is no such thing as white people, Mosley said, and in order to end race in America, all we have to do is recognize that the notion a white person doesn't really exist on any term and in any way. Keep this one in mind because he's already starting to show his bias on any term and in any way. I'll readdress this. Well, you know that people think about who they are from culture, not from supposed DNA or color, or what continent, Somebody came from a long time ago, cause then you could start talking about European people, He said, over time I said, well, nobody's white. Gypsies aren't white, and Vikings aren't white, and the Greeks aren't white, and the Spaniards aren't white. They are who they are, And they understand themselves in a certain kind of way that got redefined in America because they had to kill the Native Americans and enslave the Africans, so they had to become white people. First, how a person can use 5 times in a row in such a short interval is beyond me. Well, actually, it isn't beyond me at all. It can be analyzed through the study of discourse pragmatic function conversation analysis. This is what is called an acknowledgement marker, and it has a precise social use within linguistic psychology. In investigating a full range of discourse functions with reference to recurrent pattern distribution phenomena of repetitive acknowledgement marker overuse within a short given time, it conveys a certain level of uncertainty or lack of confidence in any given statement, hence the constant need of validation from an interlocutor. The marker itself is important because it carries and signals information which is relevant to determining the validity of the propositional content uttered by the speaker. This philosophical position, white people don't exist, even though someone's words such as culture, DNA, nation, heritage, is not the result of carefully considered deep empirical studies based on consistent data analysis, or he would be adamant about it. It is a poorly constructed shock factor thesis applied with flawed and unjust premises. Now, the reason why I'm doing this today is because I want to go through this with a fine comb, and I will leave no stones unturned. Now on to the content of the argument itself. The proposed explanation is that white people are a societal construct of flawed arbitrary group classifier based on the fact that within this very group, white, we put together people of different cultural background with different cultures. White Europeans, an Englishman, a Frenchman, an Italian, a Scandinavian, a German, an American of European descent, what do they have in common? Nothing, so white people don't exist. That's the thesis. It is a tentative answer which can and will be responded in kind, in the following way. If, based on your own parameters of culture, diversity and national differentiation, white people don't exist, then neither do black people exist. In fact, putting all black people into one single group or category is more nonsensical than doing it with white people, and differently from you, I can prove this one through science. You see, African populations harbor the greatest genetic phenotypic diversity according to molecular genetics and whole genome sequence data across a broad geographic range. That's due to extensive population substructure, the largest number of population-specific alleles, and less linkage disequilibrium among the loci, together with the heritable variation in human genome. This is why, as he doesn't know because he doesn't actually care, Africa is an important region to study human genetic diversity due to several factors such as climate variation, diet, exposure to infectious disease, a number of demographic factors such as selection, mutation, recombination and gene conversion, which result in the above-mentioned genetic and phenotypic variation within population clusters. Moreover, Europe has got 44 countries according to the UN, whereas Africa has got 54. Add that to the considerable genetic, phenotypic, cultural and linguistic diversity within African populations, and then tell me again that you've got a problem with white as a subgroup population identifier, but not with black. This is what I call bias. Despite the overwhelming evidence of African population genetics, the pattern of genome-wide nuclear genetic diversity across geographically and ethnically diverse subgroups, and enormous cultural and linguistic divergence shows either a complete ignorance on the topic or a deliberate misuse. I'll take either. So however you try to frame it, culture, nation, geography, language, this argument is mute on a multitude of levels. It shows an extreme bias and the sole objective of singling out a specific group, namely white people, for political reasons, in complete disregard of objective reality. And yes, on the last section of this video I will get to the political concept of whiteness, which is a completely different kettle of fish. One thing at a time. If significant ethnic, cultural, phenotypic and linguistic disparity within these arbitrary subgroups was really the basis of your argument, you would have said that black and white people don't exist, we are all human beings, but you didn't, and that is why your argument is hereby destroyed. Among some of the comments under this article, we read: actually, there are and is no such thing as white or black, no one has white skin and no one has black skin. This has been a deception used for 100 years, and then the rest of the comment is irrelevant to the subject at hand. Okay, so this is a rather different approach, still linguistic, but on a different stand. I can give this person a little credit because at least it was fair in applying these parameters to both black and white people, but unfortunately I have to say that even this one is highly ignorant. And it can be paired with some of the comments that I sometimes get under my videos with people complaining about the term olive skin, such as this one. Even though I do agree that subgroups within the human species tend to be rather arbitrary and do change over time, this expectation that all adjectival word usage within language has to be 100% descriptive is nonsensical. Calling people white is wrong because you aren't the color of paper. Calling people black is wrong because they aren't actually pitch black. Olive skin, no one looks like an olive. As I have addressed on my debunking video, Ancient Greeks couldn't see blue, highly suggested, link in the description, we shall now address the linguistic concept of type modification. Every word of a natural language can be categorically described by a matrix of values that represent the implementation of features that, in their turn, are categorical properties. Adjectives and nouns serve multiple functions within spoken vernacular and formal speech, only one of which is a descriptive function. Another common phenomenon when it comes to linguistic functions within language theory is that of categorization, whereby an adjective loses its vestiges, its original semantic meaning, sometimes partially, sometimes almost entirely, in order to create a category. For example, the term white wine. We all use it, and yet it's yellow. Would you say that white wine doesn't exist because it doesn't look like milk? Sure, it has got a golden yellow chromatic quality to it. That doesn't mean that the word white cannot be used to classify a category. Now, this happens to be an example in English, white wine, but then again, it so happens that we do the same thing in Italian. We say vino bianco, fantastic. But as we look at different languages, including ancient ones, for example, Old Norse, Latin, you'll notice that these semantic contents can be expressed morphologically in different ways. In Old Norse, high-quality gold was described as red, and so was the sun. African people, to stay in topic, were described as blue. Now, that's not because the Norse were lying, just like you are not lying when you call wine white. It was a linguistic category. Ravens, interestingly, are also sometimes described as blue. Now, when it comes to the birds, it could easily be explained away with the concept of structural correlation that I don't have time to jump into right now. But when it comes to African people, why did they describe them as blue? Well, that is because within Norse culture, the color blue conveyed a concept of exotic. Language range cross-linguistic comparison demonstrates that typological classification is a well-documented cognitive behavior within evolutionary linguistics and is widespread in the sense that it's linguistically expressed by morphosyntactic means in many languages. It is not a lie, it is not a conspiracy, it's a common linguistic human phenomenon within communicative systems. Now, regardless of the fact that political agents and entities may have used this non-descriptive adjectival usage of categorization, black, white, for their own benefits and gains, that does not mean that we are, linguistically speaking, in front of an anomaly. In fact, on the contrary, this is a very common phenomenon which happens within the species-specific linguistic continuum that can be diachronically attested. There's nothing wrong or strange with calling people black or white. When they say white, most people today do not have the old school political concept of whiteness in mind when they use that classifier. Namely, the idea of whiteness meant as a very small group of people, usually of Protestant faith, English speaking, of Anglo-Saxon origin only. In other words, the approach to whiteness that, say, Benjamin Franklin had, for example, the fact that Italians and Spaniards were not considered white, but neither were Swedes, Germans and Irish. I mean, Swedes and Irish are as white as that wall, and still he wouldn't consider them white. Well, that is a very old concept of whiteness, and of course it is. Mr. Franklin was born in 1705 and the idea even predated him, but that doesn't mean that people today still use it the same way. In fact, it is a fact that the concept of whiteness has become broader and it has changed. And I can testify to that as a legal immigrant to the United States, because as I was going through the immigration office, the immigration officer gave me the forms that I needed to fill in, or should I say fill out. When I reached the section on ethnicity, when it came to the US Census, I asked, I'm Italian, what should I write? And this Asian American officer told me, just put white. That is because the idea of white has now become any person of European descent who has got pale or light skin. This is how we use it, and there is nothing wrong with this specific categorization. So people who push this idea of white people don't exist, it's a social construct, what they are doing is that they are addressing the old idea, disingenuously pretending that that also encompasses what every other person thinks when they say they are white. I can prove this to you. If you're a white American watching this right now, let's say that you are a Catholic or an atheist. Also, let's say that half your family comes from Germany and the other half comes from Ireland. Well, according to Benjamin Franklin, you wouldn't be white, but I am 100% sure that you still consider yourself white. Why? Because you're using the modern idea. You're of European descent, your skin is light. This is why I'm absolutely adamant that Mr. Mosley is wrong when he says that the way to solve the problem of race in America, and should I say in the world, is to remove white. No, it's not, because by doing that you wouldn't be removing just the political tool of whiteness, the old school one, but you would be removing also the absolutely legitimate categorization that white people use when they talk about a less melanated skin. What really needs to be removed is bullying, violence, discrimination of people who don't look like you. The solution is the implementation of unbiased anti-racism curricula based on social equality, fairness, and removal of racial inequity on all sides. It's not okay to be horrible to a person because they have black skin. It is not okay to be horrible to a person because they have white skin. And before anyone says that that never happens, let me show you some of the comments I get under my videos. Okay, but what about those who keep pushing this idea, blah blah blah, but it's still a social construct, so white people don't exist? Okay, well then money is also a social construct. Money is absolutely a made-up concept. It is a social construct all the same. Does that mean that money doesn't exist? Okay, to those who say yes to that, how about we do this? You send me all of your $100 bills or banknotes, and I will send you an equal amount of $1 bills. If money doesn't exist, what's the matter with that? Nobility. Nobles are a social construct. There is absolutely no justification within the realm of physics to identify people as nobles, and yet we do. In fact, it is more of a social construct than white people and black people. Why? Because if I put a white person and a black person right next to each other, you can still tell them apart. But if I put a man of royal blood or blue blood right next to someone who is wealthy, of the same ethnic group and from the same country, but is not knighted or doesn't have any nobility title, you will not be able to tell them apart. Does that mean that kings and queens do not exist, and princes and dukes, should we remove them all from history books because it's a social construct, so kings actually don't exist? So in the same way, stating that white people are a social construct and using that as a form of justification to say that then white people don't exist does not hold water. Because the solution to racism is not to remove white only. The solution is to remove the idea that one type of human is inherently superior to the other. But these people are purposely keeping it vague. It was never about uniting us human beings as members of one single species for a new society where the value of a life transcends color and phenotypical variance. Excuse for pseudo-political frauds to enable a discriminatory sentencing against white people. All discriminatory language against black, brown, white, Asian is bad. All of it. Historically, all humans did bad things to other humans. In order to build a racism-free society, the first step is to treat everyone equally with respect, kindness, and fairness. And that includes white people too. This, Mr. Mosley, is what we need to realize to end racism. Regardless of where it comes from, the path of hate leads to destruction and a new form of social injustice, whereas a path of unbiased truth will lead to respect, equality, and freedom for all. Pick your side.